we'll kick off, and as people join, they join. You're very welcome. My name is Tania Banotti. I'm the director of the Creative Ireland programme, and I'm joined today by a number of panelists and speakers who you'll meet in turn. My colleague Adele Mealy, who will be in charge of the Creative Climate Action Fund, Dr. Rob Mooney from the Citizen Engagement, Local Authorities and Community Leadership side of the Department of the Environment, Dr. Ruth Doyle from EMCO, and Katrina Fallon, one of our current project participants from the first round of Creative Climate Action. So we look forward to answering your questions. We've left plenty of time for Q&A, and as we go, if we can, we'll be answering questions. If for some reason you've asked a really hard question that we can't quite answer, we will have, in fact, we currently do have an FAQ section in the application portal on submit.com, and that FAQ section will be updated after this meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and a PDF of the slides and a video recording of this meeting will also be on submit.com. So look, without further ado, just sit back, and what we'd like to do is just play you a little video that sets out some of the aspirations for this fund. My apologies, I put the wrong video on the screen, but I put the right one in the link. So look, a little bit of background to the Creative Climate Action Fund. Essentially, this is really a call for people to assemble, to really think about how the talents of the arts, cultural, creative and heritage sector can be harnessed to the challenge of engaging the public on climate change, and really about the urgent need for changes in our own lives. I should state it's not in any way to take away from the actions that need to be done by government, by business, by others, but this is really about the public and climate action. Next slide. So the overall fund is 3.6 million. 600,000 of that is reserved for shared island initiatives, and we'll come back to that during the presentation. And as a result of what we learnt from the first fund, there will be two strands, Spark and Ignite. So the first is for projects between 20 and 50,000, and the second is for projects from 50,000 to 250,000. On page 7 of the creative brief that you will hopefully have had a chance to have a quick look at, we really begin to unpack the themes that we're asking people to address. And those themes come from a lot of the work that our colleagues over in the Department of Environment and Communications and Climate Action are thinking about. So helping people to rethink lifestyles. That also includes repair and the circular economy, connecting to the biodiversity crisis, both here in Ireland and abroad, ensuring a fair and just transition, which is why we have the image of one of the projects we've done in the first round of the fund with the Bordnamona Workers Village in the Midlands, understanding the changing climate, so things about climate literacy and trying to tackle that, and adapting places to climate change. Those themes are unpicked in further detail on page 7 of the creative brief. So we started this back in 2021, and I suppose we're in a lucky position in Creative Ireland that we've been given permission by government to try things that haven't been tried before. We knew that the cultural sector has always been at the forefront of culture change, but we thought we could do more in this space to think about the kind of creative solutions that we know we need to do. We're delighted and surprised to know that this is in fact the largest fund of its kind in Europe, and the first really explicit connection at state level between a ministry that deals with the environment and climate action and a ministry that deals with the culture sector. We received an awful lot of applications, and I'm simply putting that in there because if that was the case with the first round of the fund, we expect that also to be the case with the second iteration of the fund. What was interesting was that the applications came from all over the country, from all different kinds of people, perhaps people we hadn't expected, like the university sector, to get behind it as enthusiastically as they did. And really the creative medium, there is no creative medium that we didn't receive an application for. Some of them are listed there on the screen, but it also included virtual reality, comedy, and anything in between. And we really welcome any and all creative approaches, including, I should say, heritage. So ultimately, we selected 15 projects. They were all largely at the bigger end of the scale. This is probably our smaller and dear project down in Callan, which was the pop-up energy store. But essentially, we tried to get a broad geographic spread, and we'll be trying to do that next time around with this fund. We're also looking for a very broad and diverse range of creative approaches. So in this case, it was a theatre company and a circus company running a pop-up energy store in Callan. You can see here on the screen the list and diversity of the kind of projects that we supported, both in terms of their geographic location and the kind of things that they did. We do have a lot of detail on those projects on our website, and we can pop that in the chat function, some links if you'd like to know a little bit more about each of these projects. And in fact, most of them also have their own website. So you can really, if you're looking for either ideas or to see what got through the last time, there's plenty of information available. So I think what we've learned from the first round of the fund, and we weren't sure if it would work, and I say that we also learned from things that didn't work as much as things that did work, is that definitely the creative element has allowed things to happen in ways that would not have been possible without that creative element. You'll hear more about that, about our project with the Dingle farmers later. But we definitely know, as a result of the first pilot projects, that creative element is like the lubricant, the glue that helps make a lot of other things happen, from conversations, sometimes difficult conversations, to action. I suppose one of the things we wanted to say to people who are maybe hearing about this fund for the first time, that it isn't art for art's sake. Obviously, there are other funding agencies like the Arts Council who will fund artists who perhaps are very concerned about the climate crisis to make work that reflects on that. This is really absolutely at the heart of it, around public engagement, community engagement. And I will say that the slight nuance for this new fund is that can be a community of place or practice or interest. In most cases with the first round, it was very much geographic communities of place, but we are open to communities of practice. And really it's about what can that creative element bring to the process. So it's not about a final artwork. There have been final artworks and you'll see some of them as we go, but it's really about the process and the use of that creativity to get public engagement, as opposed to I'm an artist, I wish to make a theatre show to tour, and that is my engagement. We're looking for something slightly different than that, because there are obviously other funders who can support the art for art's sake. I'll hand you over to Rob.
Thanks, Tanya. Adele, I was just wondering, is it possible to share slides from my screen? If not, I can talk to the slides there, just a slightly more updated information for the group. I'm easy either way.
Maybe stick with the slides we have, Rob.
Okay, no worries. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so I want to talk to you a little bit about, I suppose, the National Dialogue on Climate Action and how we've been working with Creative Ireland, I suppose, to date, and how this also supports kind of the programme that we're working on, some of the key pillars that Tanya has touched on already. The background context to this is that it is Ireland's long-term goal to transition to a carbon neutral society by 2050. This was established in the Climate Active 2021, and then it's really realised in the Climate Action Plan of 2021, which sets out a series of actions by all the different sectors of society, step by step, by how we're going to try to achieve this. A core part of that transition, as Tanya's already touched on, the government's view is that the government's role is to lead by example, but this transition will require fundamental changes in all aspects of our lives, how we live, work, eat, etc. You know, consume foods, and the more we can progress collectively on this sort of transition, the more effective it will be. The Creative Ireland programme really is an excellent example of how we can start thinking about reimagining that social contract between government, stakeholders, people, communities, and how we start sort of exploring that transition in a way that's fair and equitable. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the National Dialogue is really the national engagement programme to engage with people across all of society on this transition. At the core of that is the recognition that we need to co-create solutions to climate action between government stakeholders, the public and communities. It's in recognition that climate change affects everyone, but not equally. We need to, as I said, engage, enable and empower everyone in society to create solutions for themselves, but also in a way that's effective and impactful. And ultimately, we're trying to transition in a way that's outcome focused. So I think, as Tanya said, we're looking at some of the Creative Ireland programs not only create sort of awareness, but inspire people to make changes in their own lives and behaviours in a way that's accessible, and not only helps us transition, but improves their overall quality of life. And again, fairness and just transition is at the core of all the work that we do. Next slide, please. So in 2021, and you'll see in the Climate Action Plan, we had 3 key pillars to improve climate literacy, promote engagement across society, and then we had a research component to capture insights from all our engagement activities and then feed back to the Climate Action Plan. So part of that programme was we held our first National Youth Assembly on Climate at the start of the year. We engaged 40 or 50 young people, heard their voices, their concerns, opinions and views on what the barriers to that transition was and some of their insights and recommendations. And they were fed directly back to the Minister. We had 2 large national climate stakeholder forums this year, and that brought together 300 or 400 stakeholders from across society. And again, we heard their views on what the key challenges are and how we address them. We held our climate conversations, which were a broad online engagement activity, but also we held a series of focus groups with people that are vulnerable to the transition to carbon neutrality. We met with PPN, or public participation networks. We also held interviews with people with specific views on this, whether it's engagement or social scientists or even from the creative sector. So we've tried to this year get views and insights from a broad range of people on how do we co-create these solutions, how do we transition to carbon neutrality, as I said, in a way that's fair, equitable, but also in a way that we can measure the impact and the efficacy of what we're doing. And I was lucky enough to work with Tania and the team at the start of the Creative Ireland programme when we started embedding some of these kind of metrics and these measurements and looking at how do we better capture, the impact of the Creative Ireland programme. And it's been excellent to see some of the initial reports coming out to date. This year, we're in the Climate Action Plan 2023. We've tweaked the approach slightly. So we do recognise that awareness through our research programmes, awareness of climate change is really high. It's nearly 100%. What we also hear from the public, though, is people want a reliable source of information that they can go to. They want to be able to trust the information and the insights that they're getting. So the different ways we can engage people in that kind of information and improve awareness, the better. And again, Creative Ireland goes towards addressing that. As I said already, we have an inclusive programme of engagement across society at a national level, but we're now working far more inclusively with the local authorities, with other community groups such as ECO, UNESCO. I work with the IEN, we work with the GAA on their Green Clubs program, the Antarctica Green Schools, etc. So again, how do we go out to society and engage with people across a myriad of different existing structures, programs and initiatives at that local and community level? And again, Creative Ireland supports, really is very supportive in that, and as a different avenue for access for people. The third, as we really began last year on this program of improving climate literacy. We've done a lot of research on this year, and climate literacy really stems from ideas like health literacy or financial literacy. And really what it means is that people have enough information for themselves to begin making changes that are accessible to them, that are effective for them. Because what we know is that people want to take action, they're enthusiastic, they want to get engaged, but some people don't know where to start. And that's a really important piece for us for this year. And then the fourth pillar is to improve, as I said, positive behavioral change by empowering people to improve their own quality of life, whilst also transitioning to carbon neutrality. Next slide, please. So as I said already, some of the key initiatives we delivered this year, the Climate Conversations, the Youth Assembly, the Stakeholder Forum, and again, working with Creative Ireland, how we more effectively engage with people across society. You'll see in the Climate Action Plan, which is going to be launched pretty shortly, the chapter 9 in that is the engagement chapter, and that really talks about the work of the National Dialogue on Climate Action and what we're trying to achieve. So really what we're trying to do, as I said, is look at every way to actively engage with people across society. We have our national programs, some of the local authority programs are going to kick off again, but as I said, the Creative Ireland program is a unique, and as Tania said, it's a creative and innovative way to engage people in this, and that's frankly it's a very welcome sort of addition to providing insights for us in our particular program, but it also expands people's opportunity to get engaged and have much more interesting discussions around climate, rather than just talking about the scientific elements or the practical elements of it as well. So I'm happy to leave it there for the moment, but happy to take any questions if that's useful.
Great. Hi, everyone. I hope you can all hear me okay. So my name is Ruth Doyle, and I'm a director at EMCO. And I've been working in sustainability for over 15 years in academia and consulting, and particularly looking at sustainable lifestyles and behavior change. And I think it's fair to say, over that period, climate change has really gone from something that was quite niche and was kind of like a left field issue to something that's become much more mainstream. Every day in the media, we open our newspapers, we often see something on environmental issues. So it is becoming much more part of the everyday dialogue, and climate change is being recognized as one of the defining societal challenges of our time. However, that doesn't necessarily mean we have made progress that we need to make. So as with almost all other EU countries, Ireland did see a rise in its emissions at the start of 2022, mainly due to rebound after the pandemic, but we have now gone above our pre-COVID levels. So there is an urgent need to really get this under control and achieve our 51% reduction in emissions by 2030. So that's 8 years' time. So the imperative is there, and I think you all probably understand this. But what happens now, the things we do today have such great impact, like the way we design our cities, our infrastructures, our energy systems. We're all living with that legacy, you know, down the line. So, and that is really shaping how we consume and how we produce today. So we need to think about how we creatively respond and adapt to climate change. Next slide, please. So this is some findings here from a report that the EPA commissioned, which was a large-scale poll, about 4,000 people across Ireland, a representative sample, and it just gives a sense of what people are thinking and feeling about climate change and climate action at the moment. And we're going to post the report in the comments there. Just it's a useful resource for all of you when you're thinking about how you might approach this opportunity. So we know largely that people do believe in climate change. It's not a case of, you know, convincing people of the science as it might have been 10 years ago or so. People understand the seriousness of climate change and they really do see it as a problem. And there is an appetite for action. They want government to take action, so long as that action is fair and is just. I suppose one of the main kind of ways in which policy can respond to climate change is through pricing, financial instruments, taxes, etc., to make sure that the environmental impacts of the products and the services that we buy are reflected in their costs, which can increase prices. And obviously climate action shouldn't be something that is just the preserve of those who have the means and the wealth to take action. It should be something that's available to everyone. So for example, you know, thinking about how we move around through cars, etc. If petrol and stuff becomes really expensive, some people can't actually buy into that. Equally, they can't buy electric vehicles, which is why we look at things like financial incentives and grants to try and level that playing field. So it is something that everyone can do and everyone can do easily. The next important thing to say about environmental attitudes is while we are all thinking more sustainably, and 9 in 10 people say that the issue of climate change is personally important to them. So it's personally important to them. They've got environmental values. They say they have, you know, they want to change, but we often see what we call a value action gap. So you have environmental values, but you're not translating that into action in your daily life. And that's not necessarily, you know, a fault. That could be just a challenge of time, or not having the products available to you, not having, you know, a local bus service or bike lanes outside your house. So we really want to act. We're not always given the opportunity to do so, but it is positive that the willingness to change and the tendency to change behavior is increasing year on year. Next slide, please. So one key issue that we have to grapple with when we think about raising awareness about climate change is that it is often just this big nebulous issue. The impacts are diffuse and they're spread across space and time. Climate change impacts are interwoven into the very fabric of our daily lives and into every single activity we carry out throughout our lives. It is really difficult to get our heads around and to understand how we can break it down to simple actions. And also the impacts are kind of perceived as being distant. You know, the kind of classic image that we see is the melting ice caps, as polar bears. It's often distant impacts, but I think in recent years, it's becoming much more local. We're understanding that climate change isn't someone else's problem. It's very much our problem. I know the old mantra used to be, you know, think global, act local. As in, you know, you would act out of benevolence and care and a duty of responsibility for others. But actually, you know, the impacts and the negative impacts are very much so going to be felt in Ireland and on our own doorstep. You know, we see things like sea level rise, coastal erosion, flooding, extreme weather events, and I think people are understanding that more, that anything that can get people to relate it to their own lives is really helpful. I mean, climate emissions themselves are invisible. So I think the challenge of making visible the impacts of climate change is really important. And you know, it's not like I fill my glass of water and the one next to me directly empties. There's no direct kind of correlation between our actions and the impacts, and that is a challenge that the kind of creative community can get their head around. Next slide, please. So the problem, I mean, people are situated within the infrastructures and broader systems, and really kind of they take action based on what others are doing around them. And also one thing that's a really kind of important way to think about climate change is that we are just carrying out our daily lives, and our daily lives consist of a multitude of actions. Now, we might use energy in those actions. So, you know, we want to be warm. We want to have the end results. We don't want the energy. We want to be warm in our houses. We want to move around. We want to be fed and nourished. And how might we meet those needs in different ways that cause less environmental impact is a key kind of question for innovation and design. So design out the pollution, design out the energy, design out the negatives, and retain those needs, and still allow us to flourish in our lives and enjoy our lives, and create a picture of a positive vision that people can buy into. Next slide, please. So as I said, we cannot see people as the problem. We can see, and we can kind of put our creative minds to thinking about what the solutions might be to enable us to live our lives without harming the environment. I think one important thing is there's so much exciting action going on out there, and there has to be kind of a positive, desirable vision that people can buy into. And to answer that question, we really do need to bring together the best of Ireland's creative minds. And this is why the Creative Climate Action Fund is so important. And it's great to see such interest in it here today. Thanks very much.
Now, can you hear me? Hopefully. Okay, so I might go to the next, actually the first slide, I think. Yeah, brilliant. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk to you for a little bit about the Creative Climate Action Project we ran here down on the Dingle Peninsula throughout this year. Kirkagween and Vunaha Creative Imagining. I'm going to sort of rattle through this. So I suppose the aim of the project really was to support farmers to diversify in the face of climate change. That was the kind of key bit, and underneath that there were a couple of maybe smaller objectives. One was addressing that whole sort of polarized debate that is in the public domain between this idea of farmers and environmentalists. We just find that not to be the case on the ground. We wanted to try and address that if we could. And we also wanted to sort of reflect the reality of farming lives back to broader society. So what approach did we use? We used an embedded artist approach, and Ben Twister, I think, is here at the panel, Creative Carbon Scotland, with the sort of inspiration for that. So that's where an artist is embedded in a project throughout, and we worked with 10 farming families from the Dingle Peninsula. So the project began basically, it kicked off its sort of physical manifestation in January of this year, but in terms of the planning and recruiting of the artist and the farmer, that was a lot longer. And I suppose a huge amount of time went into thinking about the actual concept and what we were going to do. Why did we pick farming? Well, we felt it was a very challenging topic. We actually shied away from it a couple of times, went back to it, shied away from it again, and eventually decided to address it. Now I'm thinking I've kind of lost my, sorry. So next slide, please. As we were very lucky that we had 3 organizations involved that were really already very experienced. So we had the Dingle Hub, which is very involved in the energy transition on the Dingle Peninsula. We had MARI, the Marine and Renewable Energy Institute based in Cork, and they have a huge amount of experience and expertise. We had Claire Watson, who is a PhD in community engagement and climate change. So there was a lot of experience in the team. We decided the first thing obviously was to actually select the artist, and we felt it was very important to put enough information. So we created an artist brief to make sure that any artist that was interested in applying had as much information as possible. We had about 50 applications from across the world, it must be said, and then we tried to make the application as simple as possible, and then we had a short list of 5, and we paid those 5 artists to present to a panel. Next slide, please. So how did we select the artists? Well, a key part of it was that both myself and Deirdre were involved in the West Kerry Dairy Farmers Sustainable Energy Community, and we got the 4 farmers on that committee to join with us. So they were involved in the selection of the artists the whole way through. They went through the submissions. They were there on the day when the 5 contestants were being interviewed. So that gave us, I suppose, a lot of confidence in that we felt that the farming community at large would have a bit more trust in the process, but also we had confidence that the farmers would pick somebody, would select an artist that resonated with them. And they picked a wonderful artist, Lisa Fingleton. Even though the applications came from across the world, she's from North Kerry. She's a farmer herself. She's also an environmental activist, and she is an artist. So all of that made such a huge difference. Next slide, please. So then how do we select the farmers? Well, Tommy, the marketing account about so we did use Irish in quite a lot of what we were doing, but we put out an open call for farmers. We had about 20 farmers who submitted, who asked to be involved. We did an information webinar, but the farmers we picked, it was critical that those farmers were not farmers who had already made the transition. So we were looking for farmers who were very much at the beginning of that journey. Next slide, please. So all of those farmers were picked by the beginning of January. COVID kind of got in the way a little bit, but this is just a slide, a photograph of most of the group on a farm visit. So we did a series of familiarization trips throughout the whole experience. This is on Donald Sheehan's farm in the Bride Valley in East Cork near Fermoy with Lisa, and he runs an amazing European innovation partnership project there. And so in terms of what how do we kind of engage with them? Next slide, please. We did a lot of things around these trips. We went to visit organic farms. We went to farming for nature farmers. We looked at agri-tourism. We looked at sustainable food production. We looked at renewable energy. And all the way through that, it was really the focus was on listening to farmers, building up trust. We weren't trying to teach them. We weren't trying to preach at them. We wanted those farmers to learn from other farmers. We wanted mostly to hear from the farmers themselves. So the first 4 or 5 months, the focus was really on listening to them, hearing their concerns, building up that sense of community, that sense of trust, WhatsApp groups, information sessions, talks, whatever we could do, visits to the individual farmers. Next slide, please. This is with the wonderful Brendan Dunford, who runs the Burren program in North Clare, and he's talking to us about the wonderful program that they run there, where they support farmers to carry out environmental actions. On the right-hand side, the lady in orange is Claire Watson. So Claire Watson was the embedded researcher, so she was evaluating the project throughout, and that was a key part, I suppose, of how we approached it. So everything we did, really, it even became tedious at a certain point, but it was really, really useful. She evaluated the workshops, the visits, the farm trips, all of that was evaluated by her, and that kind of kept us on the straight and narrow. If we felt that things weren't heading in the right direction, we could tweak, and that evaluation was critical, and she'll be doing some learning briefs, which she's going to produce at the end of January. Next slide, please. And how did creativity play a role? Well, it was really the amazing talent of Lisa Fingleton. She had the capacity to be that creative spark. She's knowledgeable, sympathetic, and also great fun. And fun was a huge part of the whole thing. You know, that building up relationships between everybody, spending time together. And she was constantly sketching and reflecting experiences back to the farmers. And she's created a series of 10 short films, which were due to be screened a couple of days ago, but had to be postponed because of the bad weather. Next slide, please. But this is a wonderful drawing that she did following. We did a climate workshop here in my own house in the month of June, and we were looking at talking to the farmers really about solutions. How did they see the solutions? So this is after that workshop. During the workshop, she did a kind of a rough version, and this is the final version of the drawing, reflecting all of the ideas that the farmers came up with, things they could do, things they would like to do, what the obstacles are, and so on. Next slide, please. And finally, just in terms of we engaged with the broader public on a number of occasions throughout the project. Initially, we did a Gohanón Gurt in the Mart as part of Féile na Bealtaine back in May. We did another event as part of the Féile Spól local festival here in August. This is Lisa speaking at the Farmers Forum as part of the Dingle Food Festival at the end of September. And here she's talking about her experience, talking to a broader section of the community, but also a lot of farmers, people involved in food production, and talking about her experiences working with the farmers. And finally, next slide, please. Creative Ireland invited the project to come up, or invited Lisa to come up and create this amazing creative wall as part of the ploughing championships. And most of the farmers managed to come up for that day, and we sort of engaged with the public, engaged with Lisa, worked on the wall. So that was all, I suppose, a kind of a wider extension of that sense of public engagement. I think we're going to show you there's a little preview of those 10 short profiles that Lisa has made, and I think some magic wand is going to help that to be shown from your side of things.
But we have seen ourselves in the last 10 or 15 years, what it'll be like in 50 more years.
Siadna daoine thar leabhar is mó haithís lei seo.
We're trying to be the most efficient at what we're doing, like it takes generations to build up a hill.
Bíní gcónaí dúláin a bhaint le fear móracht. Ach leis an tathhrú éráidí tá dúláin a níos bhógan. An rud is mó atá ag tarlú ná stirmicha. Tá na stirmicha I bhaidir níos measa ná mar a bhíad ar riamh.
I've been brought up growing veg. That's all I've ever known. Where we're standing here at the minute was once the sea, so we're actually farming more or less on the beach.
It's a hard life, but it's a lovely life, and it's a lovely place to grow up. The kids, they're all involved in it in their own way. They have another choice.
We do chickens and turkeys, and we milk cows. It's a bit like old McDonald's. We're doing a bit of everything.
Is toch downta grŵp so corcoline in wonen is toch een groep hagen downta chéile. Ha mi de fáman na chéile.
I've also found that my own farm has a lot more biodiversity than I thought it had. Things that we pass every day and don't take any notice of.
In this group, they're all concerned for the next generation and to leave the land and soil and trees in a better condition than we got them.
Hi folks, so thank you all so much for coming today. It's fantastic to have so many people here and have such a great interest in the next iteration of the Creative Climate Action Fund. So I'm going to walk you through the application process and the differences between the two funds. And if there are any questions, we have a Q&A session at the end, but also as part of our ongoing support, there will be a frequently asked questions document on submit.com, the platform that's being used for this application, and it will be updated frequently as we get new questions in that we feel are appropriate to a wider audience. We will update that as soon as we have the information. So following consultation with the projects and a review of the initial application process from the last time round, we decided that this time we would have two strands that would center around the financial differences. So we would have strand one, which is a spark, and basically we've got grants between 20,000 and 50,000. The idea behind this is that, you know, they're experimental projects. We can test and pilot and develop new ideas, but the main thrust of both of these strands really is the creative engagement, the engagement with the community, you know, the change in public mindset. We're looking for strong concepts or ideas. The ideas don't have to be fully developed, but we want to see a fully developed brief in terms of the direction that it might take. We're looking for projects that are potentially micro projects at local level, maybe led by a single artist, led by a small community group. And, you know, we are, when I go through the criteria later on, while the criteria for both strands are the same, what's expected in both strands is significantly different because of the differences in monetary value. So, as I said, individuals are quite welcome to apply under strand one. But we are looking for collaboration. It's not a project led by one person with nobody else involved. Even though it's a smaller project, it is still collaboratively based. So if you have a small community group that may have a connection with a local university or a local further ed centre or an environmental group that's local, you know, that we're looking for as many different options as possible, but it is collaborative, and we are looking for the engagement of the local community primarily. And as Tania said earlier, we're expanding this time the understanding of what community means, that there is the community of place, but there's also community of practice. So, you know, any questions on that, we can take them later, but we are expanding that notion. So for strand two, then we're calling it Ignite, and it is for grants between 50,000 and 250,000. Now, what I forgot to outline with Spark is that the projects are a maximum duration of 18 months. For Ignite, we're allowing for projects to go for 2.5 years. So we're listening to the evaluations we got from the last time, and the projects of the larger projects acknowledged that they needed more time to embed the ideas. So we've listened to that and we responded to it, and we're going with 2.5 years for the larger projects. We're looking for extensive public engagement with these projects. This is not something that's, you know, light touch. This is something that's to be deeply embedded within a community. And again, community of practice, community of place. We're open to interpretation on that. It can be an idea that was maybe a smaller idea previously that's now being scaled up. And we're looking for broad collaborations and partnerships. So this is where we're looking for organizations to lead a project. So we are not accepting applications for a lead individual person in this strand. The application must come from an organization. Individual applications can come through strand 1 Spark, but for strand 2 Ignite, we do need it to be from a lead organization. With this particular strand, we are evaluating quite closely the ability to deliver these projects at scale. It is a significant amount of public funding that's been provided, and we want applicants through their application process to show that they have the capability between the organizations involved in this collaboration to deliver these projects at scale. We're looking for experience in managing interdisciplinary project teams. So we are looking for collaboration between organizations that deal with climate change, between artistic organizations, between multidisciplinary organizations. We want lots of people involved, but we want a demonstration of the ability to manage a project that has those multidisciplinary elements. We're also looking for a track record of financial management. We want to see again, someone to be able to demonstrate that they have the ability to manage funds at this level. So it's quite important to look at all these aspects. We are looking for these people to be named. So we want to know who is going to be the project manager, who is going to be looking after the financial management, who is going to be managing the teams. It's really important to us that we can see a very well-developed team for these projects. Again, it's a significant amount of public funding, and we're keen to ensure that it delivers to the best of its ability. So the next slide, please. So the criteria are the same for both projects, but there is a significant difference in what's expected at strand 1 level compared to what is expected at strand 2 level. So we are looking at public engagement, climate relevance, creativity, the project team, track record, and feasibility and value for money. So we want to see, you know, that the application plans on having a significant amount of public engagement. We need to see that from the outset. We are not looking for applications that involve, you know, showing the public something. It is a very deep and engaged project. You know, as Tania outlined, we are looking for creatives to be front and center in this project, but the outcome is not necessarily an art piece. It's using creativity to engage the public on this really important topic, and with the outcomes of that, whatever they happen to be, fantastic, but the engagement is the most important piece. So when you're putting your application together, please think long and hard about how you plan on doing that, because it is the key difference between this and other funds for us is this piece. Climate relevance, as Tania outlined, we have 5 themes. They're well described in the briefing document. It's really important that you ensure that your application addresses one or more of those climate themes. We want creativity. This is different to a project that is just about the science behind climate change, or an art piece developed by an artist on climate change. This is where the creativity, this is where the magic happens, where we have all these disciplines coming together to create an idea, and, you know, it allows us to see and feel climate change in a very different way. We want, again, for both strands, we do need the project team to be clearly defined. We want to know who's involved from the outset. However, what's expected of that project team from the strand 1 point of view, again, is very different to what's expected in strand 2. We want a track record. We want to see that the applicant can demonstrate their capacity to deliver this project. And then finally, we want a very well thought out budget and explains exactly the project proposal and how it's, you know, plans to be implemented. We are asking people this time around to be very, very clear on how much they're providing for project management, how much they're providing for communications and PR, and, you know, and be really, really clear as to how this support has been provided and how it's been, you know, provided either by the organization or being provided through an external provider. Next slide, please. So submit.com is the platform we use to support our application systems. And we are only accepting applications through submit.com. There is a Word document version of the application form available. That's just to assist you, to allow you to kind of spend some time thinking about the questions ahead of submitting them onto the platform. But the only way that applications will be accepted is through submit.com. It's incredibly important that you spend some time reading the briefing note. It's a big document, and an awful lot of time and effort has been put into putting it together for you. And it goes into detail what's required as part of this project, and, you know, some of the findings from the last round, and some of that might be of assistance to you as you're putting together your project. As I said earlier, we have a frequently asked questions document that we will update on a regular basis with any questions that come into us. So any questions that are raised with us that we think are a benefit to everybody, we'll make sure that information gets out to them. When you go into submit.com, you will see both applications available to you. Obviously, ensure that you apply for the one that is appropriate to you. So the strand 1 is the Spark applications, there for 20,000 to 50,000, and Ignite is 50,000 to 250,000. Thanks, Kate. And finally then, important dates. So, you know, we understand that this is, you know, a departure for a lot of organizations in terms of the interdisciplinary approach required for these projects. So we've put on a number of events to assist you with your application process. On the Tuesday, the 24th of January in the National Concert Hall in Dublin, we're holding a networking session to allow people to meet potential partners. So if you have an idea and you feel that you might like to, you know, develop that idea, but you really don't have any connections in either the scientific community or the artistic community or whatever it happens to be, this is the opportunity for you to come and meet people in person and maybe make those connections and find out things that maybe you didn't know could help your project and that will help. We're also then on Wednesday, the 1st of February, providing a support session. So for anyone who's having difficulty filling in their application forms and would like some assistance with that, we will have an online webinar to assist you with that, where we'll take any questions that you have at that point. But obviously, if you do have any questions, please submit them to us ahead of time as well. The deadline for this project is Monday, the 13th of March at 5 p.m. So it's incredibly important that you have, you know, that you adhere to the deadline, because it's an online system. It will cut off at 5 p.m. So you need to be aware of that. And again, if anyone has any questions, please ask us at the end or submit them to us over the next couple of months, and we can answer them as we receive them. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody. So now we have a good 15 to 20 minutes for Q&As. On our Q&A panel, we have Tania Banotti, Adele, who you just heard from, Rob Mooney from DECC, Ruth Doyle from EMCO, and also Ben Twist, the Director of Creative Carbon Scotland, who was on our selection panel last year. And Creative Carbon Scotland have run a similar fund. So Ben will be on hand to answer any of those questions. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that we can see each other.
And I can take some of the questions. I just haven't been able to type fast enough. So starting from the bottom and working my way up, Aideen McCole, does either award require match funding from another source or sources? No, but if you have applied for match funding elsewhere, my colleague Dr. Mooney and my colleagues in DECC, there's an extremely generous fund about to come down to local authorities next year for community climate action. There's the Pubble Fund of 5 million. There are other funds available. So all we ask is if you've applied somewhere else for funding, can you let us know, because that would obviously have an impact if that funding is necessary to have that project go ahead. But you do not require match funding. That's the beauty of this fund. Can the same group apply to both strands? The answer is it's one application only by a lead organisation. Whether you're applying to, you wish to apply several times to one or both strands, it's one application. You can be a supporting partner in another application, but you cannot say, oh, I'm sticking one in for strand 1 and one in for strand 2. It's just one application per lead organisation. I don't know, Adele, if you wanted to add anything to that, but just, I think we have local authorities can be the lead applicant.
Yeah, so we welcome lead applicants in many different guises, but even in the last round, we had a number of occasions where in some cases the local authority was the lead applicant, and in other cases the local authority was the supporting applicant, and the same will be welcome from any other organizations. So where we are only accepting applications from one application from organizations as the lead applicant, but you can be supporting another application in another format.
A question there about community radio from Porrick Griffin. What I would say, Porrick, is obviously Minister Catherine Martin has given, has doubled the funding for the BAI Sound and Vision Fund, which is open to community radio. So community radio could be a creative element of the project, but it wouldn't be for a radio series on community radio. It would have to be community radio plus, if that makes sense.
We have a couple of other questions there. I'm just going to one, in terms of strand 2 Ignite, how do you define an organization? Adele, you might take that.
So we're looking for, you know, organizations that have I suppose a structure within them, so that they can support an application that would have the ability to support the financial systems, support the project management of it, you know, with ideally that those people are within the organization themselves, or have the capacity to bring those people in. A community group wouldn't be considered an organization. We're looking kind of regional, national level type organizations.
I've popped in the chat, Kate, just some of the, for strand 2, for the $250,000 grant, the kind of people that we think might apply.
And I think when you go to the guidelines and also the FAQs, you'll see there's kind of tax criteria there as well for strand 2 that will clarify some of that. Mm-hmm. We have a question there from Margaret Loughnane. Can the same group apply to both strands? We have recommended that you don't apply to both strands for the same project, that really the project should be tailored to each strand specifically. So if it is a strand 2 project, for instance, it should be designed as such, and not something that, you know, they're not really interchangeable.
Yeah, I might just add in here, because sometimes I know people on this call will be used to applying to funds and organizations who shall remain nameless, where you might apply for 10,000 and then you're told you've got 5,000, do it anyway. That will not be this fund. So either you put in what you think it takes to run it, and either we can do it or we can't. We won't be coming back to you going, would you do it for half the money that you said you need to do it for? So this isn't a question of hedging your bets, throwing in applications to 2 funds. Pick whatever fund it is, a true and fair account of the costs that are needed, and then it will be a clear yes or no.
So we have does either award require match funding? And no, we don't require match funding, but additional funding is welcome for the projects. And in the application, we'll ask you to outline any additional funding you have, or if there's expected funding that'll come in that may impact the project, but it's not a requirement for either strand. Martha Halbert, you have a query regarding collaborations with Scottish organisations, and I think we had another question there as well. Martha, I don't know if you want to put up your hand and you can ask that in person. But in the FAQs, we've outlined the kind of criteria around the shared island funding, and that can be either a north-south collaboration, being north of Ireland and south of Ireland, or it can be an east-west. So the fund is open to collaborations with the UK, so Wales, Scotland and England as well. If you need further clarification on that, just stick your hand up there.
At the risk of inviting lots of people contacting me, we at Creative Carbon Scotland would be happy to make connections if you're looking for the right sort of partner in Scotland, and they could be cultural or climate focused organisations. So we're here to help.
Thanks, Ben. Christine Mackey, could you expand on what's meant by community of place and community of practice? I think I can take that as well, Tanya. So community of place, in the first iteration of the fund, we had a lot of local communities applying. So for example, the town of Callan would be a community of place. It's people who live in one area, and similarly with Katrina's project, a community of places, the farmers in Dingle, but Katrina's project would also kind of operate as a community of practice, because the farmers are spread out. They're not necessarily all in one locality, but they have a shared interest and a shared practice or vocation that they work towards. And that is something we expanded because we recognize that, you know, particularly when it comes to climate, there are practice-based communities, designers, artists, scientists, academics who are working in this area. They may not be necessarily located in the same space, like geographic space, even the same university, the same town, but they're working towards a shared goal. And obviously, you know, with the advent of COVID and digital projects and everything, there's nothing to stop those individuals working together. So community of practice can be anyone who's working towards a shared goal, really, and that's something for you to expand in the application and to make that case. Roisin de Butler, can the lead organisation in Ignite be a government funded one? Adele?
We would have to be very clear as to exactly what we were funding. It's not that it wouldn't be eligible. We would just need to be really, really clear as to what was being funded and what isn't. And there, you know, there's potential for it to fall into state aid areas of legislation. So we have outlined the state aid legislation in the document. So if you do feel that that might be an issue, you might want to contact us. But yes, there's no reason why they shouldn't apply, but you just need to be very, very clear that the funding provided for this is being provided for this project and this project alone.
Thank you. So another shared island question there, I think we've answered it, but it does not need to be 50-50 engagement. There's quite kind of a detailed explanation of the shared island part of this fund in the guidelines that I'd encourage you to read. So it can be a project that's operating mainly out of Ireland and has a shared island component, and the funding can go towards that, or that component of the fund operates in a variety of different ways. So Paula, I would encourage you to read that part of the guidelines document and come back to us. Yeah,
we're flexible.
If there's anything more specific.
We feel that some projects that have got in touch with us, the main project will be in the Republic of Ireland, but there's an element that would be a north-south bringing of groups together, but it's not the whole project. So we could use some of the shared island funding for that. And then there are other people contacting us conceiving of this as an all island with a link to Scotland from the very beginning. And again, that's possible.
So can a group of people apply for Spark without an established organisation? So it's a smaller fund. And yes, to qualify for that, it's really the project application is the qualification for it. So if you're a group of individuals from who want to come together to put a project together, you qualify. you know, as a project team. And it's up, there is a section in the application there that explains the, you know, allows you to explain the different roles that each individual or each part of the project will take, but you don't have to have an established kind of organization. You just have to have a means of receiving the funding, and I think that's important. And Adele can talk to a little bit more about that. We've outlined that in the application guidelines as well. Can a credit union apply? I think yes is the answer if you're working with other partners. Again, if you look through the guidelines, we're expecting a kind of a balance of partnership that takes place in both of the strands between, you know, project management, creative input, climate input, community input. So it's up to your project to demonstrate how each of the partners is bringing that.
There's a question there, Kate, from Sally Starbuck about science partners. We're not saying science partners are essential, but we couldn't imagine a project being done without some climate expertise. I see Rob shaking his head there. Like, I mean, we have had a couple of applications in the past where it's simply denied climate science, perhaps just literally was misinformed about the science. So we would certainly, we're not saying science, but in the broader climate change and climate activism space based on science and data, and not kind of going off the reservation with your own theories about the science. That's, I think, what we're trying to get at.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think our experience in Scotland is that the really interesting projects come when there's cultural and science and community and all sorts of other partners involved, and bringing them together starts new conversations that then ripple through much and cascade down much more widely. And I think that's when real change comes.
Pauline Poole is project management administration and staff wage covered under the funding application. The answer is yes, and it's very important. So Adele, you might take that.
So in your budget line, we need to see where you have allocated funding for this, and it needs to be realistic. I think in some previous applications, people were unrealistic about the length of time the project management would actually take, and ended up having to take funding from other areas of the project to cover the cost of that. So we want a very realistic expectation, you know, understanding of exactly how much you plan on spending on project management, on financial management, on communications and public relations, all of those items, and the administration, particularly if it's a, you know, an organization, there is an administrative burden on the organization. We want to see that costed as well, please. Thank you.
Catherine Nunes, is there a preference for projects that are embedded in and focused on a single community, or projects that propose a more national profile or activity also of interest? Tanya, do you want to take that? Or mute there?
Sorry, what was that again, Kate? I was just typing a question to AD answer to AD.
A focus on a single community or projects of a national activity, is there a preference?
No preference. We're interested. Look, there's 3.6 million euros here, folks. We can focus on communities of place, interest, practice, and national focus. And to answer Aideen McCole, we'd be very interested, as I'm sure our colleagues in Climate Action would, around those most disadvantaged groups, or groups that have not traditionally applied, those with disabilities, traveller groups, any of those, those who are going to be most affected by the climate crisis. I'm thinking of areas that will be really affected by sea surges, by the change in energy usage and Bordemona areas. Like, in other words, yes, we are interested in communities of place interest, and we are interested in national projects.
I'll just add to that, if you don't mind. So yeah, just to confirm exactly as Tanya's saying, a core component of the Climate Conversations 2022 this year was really trying to initial reach out to communities, as we're loosely calling, vulnerable to the transition to carbon neutrality. And that's going to be a much bigger part of our program in 2023. So we'll be doing that as part of the national dialogue, but equally any and all other forms of engagement would be very, very welcome.
So I think we've covered all of the questions in the chat there. There's a couple of people with their hands up, so I might just see if we have some real life questions. Anita McKeown, I'm going to just unmute you, so if you want to bring your question.
I think all my questions were answered
in
the chat. Thank you, though.
And we have Jessam in Fairfield. Who we maybe have lost. Anyway, if you want to come back, by all means do. I think we've answered most of those questions, and we're coming up to the end. I see in the chat that a couple of people, Amanda Matheson, has also posted about looking at offering kind of to connect as a science partner. And we'll obviously be sharing this presentation, and people can feel free to put their details in the chat. We'll open it now. I might ask Richie to open the chat up there just briefly if people want to post contact details, and people can have a quick look. But I would encourage everyone who can to sign up for the networking event that we're holding on the 24th of January. The idea of that is really to have people meet in person and to allow projects to connect with each other. Quite a few of our projects from the first iteration connected through a networking session that we held. So, and you know, they were really successful, and it was new partnerships that came about just for the purpose of this one. So, whilst there is a certain you know, amount of experience that we're looking for, and particularly for the second strand Ignite, we're very much welcoming people to connect specifically to bring their expertise in different areas together for this fund. So if you we'll post the link to that networking session as well. It will be in person, and obviously you know, if there's a demand, we may look at doing something online as well to accommodate some of the shared island funding. But we hope that people will attend that and connect in person. We've posted all of the links to the various guidance documents, frequently asked questions, etc. in the chat. But the main kind of port of call for all of this is Creative Ireland submit.com platform, where we'll be updating the frequently asked questions on a weekly basis, updating the additional resources, and putting any, like the link to this webinar and everything, the recording in there. So it's worth checking back on that frequently. You can create a draft application there and work on it kind of as you go along. So it's worth, like Adele said, making sure that you're familiar with submit.com as a platform, but also familiar with all of the guidelines. I think we have a dedicated email address as well for questions that'll come in. They'll be monitored by the Creative Ireland team and ourselves over at EMCO, so we'll do our best to answer any of those as much as possible, and we'll update the frequently asked questions with those as well. Adele?
I just wanted to outline, I don't think I mentioned earlier, within the next 2 weeks, we're going to upload a copy of the agreement that will cover all of what you will be signing up for if you are awarded funding. So it allows you to understand what reporting requirements are, what the financial requirements are, any confidentiality issues, any of those things, they'll all be outlined in that. So it just gives you, you know, a view of what you're signing up for ahead of being awarded the grant funding.
Okay, super.
Thank you everybody so much. We're really, really excited about the fund. I hope you got a sense from Katrina and maybe looking at some of the initial 15 projects on our website, just how wonderful the first suite has been. And we're just really excited and looking forward to partnering with some of you from next year on.